Joining us now on the guest hotline, powered by Gruber Law. One call, that's all. From Packer Report, you can follow him on Twitter at Book of Eli _NFL. It is Eli Berkovits joining us here. How are we doing today, Eli?
I am doing good. I am very excited. Obviously, it's always sad when the Packers season ends, but I love the NFL draft. I love the entire NFL draft season. So I'm looking forward to diving into the class and heading down to Mobile next week to attend the Senior Bowl and be there for all the practices and kind of get my eyes on the guys.
Yeah, what are you looking for Green Bay specifically when you're going to go down to the Senior Bowl? Because I think we're going to have you on the Mason Crosby show when you come back from there to see you can go down and report on what you saw down there in Mobile. But just before we get into some more Packers topics, like the draft, it's hard to get into this year without a first round pick, right? It's hard to think about what you can look for later on in the draft. But the Senior Bowl is a great place to do that. What are you expecting and what are you looking for to help Green Bay's needs in 26?
I think, obviously not having a first round pick, it's tough. Guys, everyone loves to do mock drafts and it's just like waiting until the second round. And let's be real, it's very hard to project who's going to be there in the second round. It's hard enough to project who's going to be there in the mid-20s where the Packers usually pick. But let's be real, Brian Gutekunst makes most of his best picks on days 2 and 3 of the draft. So I don't think it should be the kind of thing where Packer fans are like, oh, well, no first round pick, so don't even care about the draft. Like, let's be real. Most Packers first round picks make little to no impact in the first year or even more than the first year of their career, which is just unfortunate. So I'm not looking at this year's class any differently just because there's no first round pick. And what I do really like about this year's class is the cornerback class is very good at the top and it is very deep. And we know the Packers need cornerbacks. I think they could end up drafting 2, if not 3 cornerbacks in this year's class. We've seen Goody really like when he decides he's in on a position, he kind of attacks it. We've seen him draft 3 receivers in the single draft. We've seen him draft 3 safeties in a single draft 3+ offensive linemen in a single draft. So this is the kind of class where if you want to knock out the cornerback position and feel like you really took some swings, it's a good year to do it.
Yeah, and on top of that, maybe hindsight move. They only drafted 1 last year, and it was a late round pick. Probably going to have to go all in on it this year in some capacity. How much of that would be swayed based on who they elect as the next defensive coordinator? Let's say a la Al Harris. If he were to get in there for Green Bay, just give me the reactions on him and getting the potential candidates in a row here now. Al Harris interviewed yesterday. Jonathan Gannon has interviewed as well in this. A couple other ones, Durante from Minnesota, and then what was the last one? I can't remember now. They've had 4 guys come in an interview, but it seems like the 2 names everyone wants to talk about are Al Harris and Jonathan Gannon right now, Eli.
Yeah, so first off, I think obviously whoever they hire as defensive coordinator will definitely have a big impact. Not necessarily in they're definitely drafting cornerbacks. It would be shocking if they don't, but I'm sure he'll have a say in what kind of cornerback they draft. But that being said, so the 4th interview was Christian Parker, someone I really liked, but he just got the Cowboys defensive coordinator job.
Right, that's what it was.
Which I'm pretty disappointed about because I would have been more than happy if they hired him. So now, like you said, I think most people are turning their attention to Jonathan Gannon and Al Harris. And maybe, it's the Packer fan and all of us where it's like, it would be so cool to have Al Harris back. But I don't think that's just a fan kind of thought. Like, he's done very well in Dallas. He's clearly done well in Chicago. They led the league in turnovers. Dallas, when he was there, was constantly leading or top 5 in turnovers forced. He's a very smart defensive mind. And yeah, I think anyone would be lying if they didn't say on some level, Al Harris, Packer Hall of Famer, that's a part of it. But I don't think it's like, well, this guy's coaching some awful defenses, but he used to be a Packer, so let's get him in the room. Like, no, I think he deserves to be a defensive coordinator somewhere in the NFL pretty soon, if not this year. And I think it would line up really nicely if it ended up being for the Packers.
Eli, do you feel like you have that same kind of sentiment with a guy like Jim Leonard, who also is a Wisconsin guy, has that same kind of tie back to the state, and a lot of people are a fan of? He went through that first round of coordinator hiring when they fired Joe Barry.
Yep.
Do you think this is a guy that you feel the same towards, kind of like Al Harris, even though a lot of it is tied to he has that storyline coming back to Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit weird that Leonard, I mean, reportedly kind of like turned down the job. I think he was offered the job and turned it down. And then I feel like by now I thought he would have for sure been a defensive coordinator somewhere, and maybe even more. Like if he was a coordinator a couple years ago and it went well, maybe he's already a head coach. So I'm kind of like wondering maybe the league doesn't have the same opinion of Jim Leonard as a lot of Packer fans do. But that being said, he has been a part of some very good defenses, whether it's in college or the NFL. And I think he's a very bright guy. Obviously, they can't interview him while the Broncos are still in the playoffs right now. But I'm sure the Packers are waiting until, let's be real, Broncos likely are not going to pull off an upset win with Jared Stidham. Who knows? But it's pretty unlikely. So I'm sure by next Monday or Tuesday, LaFleur will probably interview Jim Leonard, and then this process will really start to get heated up.
Eli Berkovits on Wisconsin Sports Daily, joining us here on the guest hotline, powered by Gruber Law. One call. That's all. Eli, I want to jump back because we got a question in on the YouTube chat that I think is cool to go ahead. Brett writes in, can you ask Eli the lack of underclassmen at the top of this draft? Does that make this draft class better or worse in your mind for Green Bay?
I generally prefer guys with more experience than not. Like, yes, it's nice to draft a younger prospect. It gives you more room for growth, and obviously, just being younger, healthier, usually, all that. But I also think for a team in what we consider to be a championship window, I want to be drafting guys that could come out and really make an impact in year one. When you draft a guy who's 20, 21, they're still, I mean, they're not even like fully developed, like grown human beings yet. Like, obviously, these are massive men compared to, a person like probably all of us. But when you're 23, 24, and in college now, guys are in college till even 25, that's already where it's like, are you maybe a little bit too old? But I do generally prefer a player to have at least 3-4 years under his belt, be 23, be 24. And again, maybe that's just coming at it as a Packers, like, because they're contenders. If you're a team that's a couple years out, I don't think there's anything wrong with drafting a younger prospect.
We're going to do this as a topic later on in the show, but I'm going to ask you the question. Maybe we'll play it back for people. We'll open it up for the phone lines. I want to know if previous defensive play calling experience matters to you or not, because Matt LaFleur obviously was in full control of the offense over the last, however long he's been here now. Maybe since Aaron's been gone is probably a better way to say it than just the last 2 or 3 years. And Jeff Hafley had full control over the defense during that time. If you go with a guy like Jonathan Gannon, he has that previous experience in the NFL on whatever level you like, whether it's the Eagles as the coordinator or at Arizona as the head coach. Well, a guy like Al Harris, he doesn't have that experience. He hasn't had that opportunity, but maybe you're looking for a guy with a new perspective, a little bit younger, and maybe it benefits Matt LaFleur because if it's a guy who hasn't had that experience before, you can maybe get a little more input if you want to say something as well.
Yeah, I like the idea of experience, right? Where it's like you don't want a guy necessarily, you bring him in and it's like, ooh, wow, this guy maybe is not prepared to be calling plays right now. But at the same time, I also think there's something to finding a guy at the right time in his career before he becomes a play caller and you getting kind of his first crack at it. And if it goes well, like there's almost something about like the unknown, which could it go wrong? Sure. But if it goes right, it could, like, let's be real. I think when they hired Jeff Hafley, even though at Boston College, I'm sure he was calling defensive plays, but I don't think anyone saw that hire coming. I know I personally did, and everyone was this name, that. All of a sudden, it's like Jeff, like a lot of people are like, who even is Jeff Hafley? And obviously it worked out very well. So I think whether it's Al Harris, Jim Leonard, like these guys, they could come in and maybe it will be their first time calling plays. But I don't necessarily mind that. But then again, like Jonathan Gannon, it did not go great his tenure in Arizona. I think a lot of that had to do with the roster. Obviously, Kyler Murray was in and out of the lineup with injury, but he's a good defensive coordinator. When he was with the Eagles, there was a reason why they were in the Super Bowl. They were constantly attacking the quarterback, turning the ball over. The Packers struggled to move the ball against the Cardinals this year. I mean, they won that game, but it was very, very close, as I'm sure most of you remember. So Gannon, he probably wouldn't be my first choice of who's left right now, but he certainly is in my last, and I wouldn't be, upset if that's where he ended up going.
When we talk about guys with experience, Eli, another name that I think more fans have brought up than actual like writers or anything like that is Raheem Morris. Do you think he has the same kind of play calling aptitude that you see in a Jonathan Gannon? And why do you think he's not getting the same kind of buzz despite a lot of people feeling like he's a top candidate for this position?
Yeah, I think Morris is right now, I think he's holding out hope for getting another head coaching job. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think, I mean, he's definitely going to be brought in for an interview. I mean, we all know LaFleur's history with Morris. They're good friends. They work together in Washington. And Morris, again, and like Gannon, right? You could say his tenure with the Falcons wasn't perfect as a head coach, but he's had a ton of success as defensive coordinator in the NFL. I mean, this year, the Falcons had a very young and sort of inexperienced defense. And they were, I mean, I think they were top 5 in sacks. A lot of the turn, Xavier Watts, a rookie safety, had one of the best years of any rookie defensive back. Obviously, you had James Pierce and Jalen Walker, the 2 edge rushers, had really impressive seasons. So I think Raheem Morris is also a very good defensive coordinator. There are things where it's like, when guys are kind of like retreads and they're in their second, third, fourth spot, they kind of lose their shine where it's like, well, we know what you are. And maybe it's not the best, maybe it's not the worst. It feels a little bit boring. But I think you give Raheem Morris a good defense, and he could take it from good to great or middle of the pack to good. Like, I do think he is the kind of defensive coordinator who can elevate the players that he's working with.
Eli Berkovits joining us here on Wisconsin Sports Daily, 24/7 Sports Packer Report as well. Let's go to the next question we have over here. Good last name here, Mike chiming in. How about we talk about some other coaches here? Special teams coordinator. I can't believe we still have like Rich Bisaccia. We haven't gotten any news on this at all. Where are you at with the special teams coordinator and the kicking situation in Green Bay, or any other assistant head coaches for that matter, Eli? Who else should Green Bay be targeting? Who else do you like? What else should be a priority for this team?
Yeah, Mike, great question. Great question. But no, look, I'll be honest. I'm not going to pretend that I have like a list of a bunch of special teams coordinator names. I did think that the Steelers defense special teams coordinator could have been a good option before he went to Tampa Bay. He's just been around the league for decades, and I think he has great experience. Pittsburgh, whether it was defense or special teams, always managed to seem to make plays in those parts of the game with an offense that usually wasn't that great and win games because of the other parts of the game. But like you said, I don't know how the season ended. What is it now? A week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and Rich Bisaccia is still the guy. Like, it's like that was for me a big part of why like I had my doubts about LaFleur. I feel like there's a part of him that doesn't want to like have these difficult conversations, and I could be way off base, but it's like whether you might love Rich Bisaccia, the greatest guy in the world. I've met him at a couple Packers training camps, and he is a super nice guy. But it's like, when year after year after year, you are bottom 3 in special teams in nearly every statistic, and year after year after year, you have games and sometimes even playoff games lost because of major special teams errors, it's like someone has to be held accountable. And whether or not you think Rich Bisaccia is great at his job, if his unit is consistently letting the team down, you have to address it. And one thing I'll give him credit for, and I feel like no one talked about it, I didn't bring it up on Twitter because I didn't want to jinx it, but the Packers happened to be this year, their coverage units were fantastic. On kickoff and punt returns, they didn't give up. I think I looked, the longest kickoff return they gave up this year was 50 yards, and they only gave up one other return of 40-plus yards. So that was impressive. I'll give him that. But when you had the back and forth of McManus and Haversick and the missed kicks and the blocked kicks and having 10 guys on the field on multiple field goal block attempts, where it's like, these are like basic things. And you're a coordinator who's been in the league for years and years and years. How does this continue to happen? So it's very frustrating. I hope that LaFleur's maybe just like waiting, I don't know, to bring in the defensive coordinator, figure out offensive coordinator. But unfortunately, at this point, I'm sort of leaning that he's just running it back with Bisaccia and Stenovich, because otherwise, what are you waiting for? Other guys are getting jobs. You're losing out on candidates. It doesn't make any sense. And then in terms of the kicker, look, I was someone who was like, I have faith in McManus. He's a good kicker. He was so good for us last year. The only reason he was struggling this year was he was hurt. I've lost that faith. I don't know how you could run it back with him. You want to bring him back to camp. He's under contract, so you don't want to cut him and let him compete for the job? Sure. But if I'm the Packers, I'm signing an undrafted rookie free agent kicker, after the draft, bringing him in and letting him compete. I would even let Lucas Haversick come back and compete. I don't know how you can bring McManus back. It's just like sometimes with kickers, it's like, it's a mental thing. And when you do what he did in that playoff game, that's a hard thing to come back from with the same organization.
100%, Eli. So if Rich Bisaccia is not the special teams coordinator moving forward here, and then that means he's not the assistant head coach, does that just mean the next special teams coordinator is automatically kind of in that assistant head coach position? Is it the next defensive coordinator? And then what does that role look like now that, the system's kind of changed a little bit, new contract with Matt LaFleur, new goals? What does that assistant head coach position, what is that going to be for Matt LaFleur moving forward here?
Yeah, I think a big part of LaFleur's love for Bisaccia is his experience, right? Someone he can lean on who's seen everything you're going to see in the NFL because he's been doing it for so long. And I do think that's valuable, but I don't necessarily think, I don't know how many teams are like, this guy's assistant head coach. He has a assistant head coach role. I don't think it's a bad thing to have, but I don't think it's necessary either. So, I hope he's not looking around if he does move on from Bisaccia, where it's like, well, I need a guy, in his 60s who's seen it all. Even if, let's say, they kept Stenovich, he's been around a long time. If you wanted to make him assistant head coach, I guess that's fine too. But overall, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you need to have whoever you hire next, this guy's got to be the assistant head coach. But look, I think LaFleur could certainly at times use help in the game management department from someone who has maybe been around a little longer than he has.
Eli, thank you so much for popping on today, my man. Where can people find all your great work? I'm sure you're going to be updating us all week with what you're doing down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Let the people know where they can find your stuff.
Yep, as it says there at the bottom of the screen, but for all the listeners, my writing over at Packer Report, I'm actually currently in middle of writing a bit of a preview piece for the Senior Bowl. Some of the players I'm most excited to look out for that I think the Packers would have interest in that should be there on day 2 of the draft. So you'll find that on Packer Report probably coming up this weekend, Friday or Saturday. And then all my work over on Twitter at Book of Eli _NFL. And like you said, all next week, I'll be posting video content, written content, all sorts of updates from down at the Senior Bowl. So if you're into the draft, make sure to come, give me a follow. I'm going to get you as much content as I can.
Perfect. We'll catch up again soon, Eli. Thanks, my man.
Thanks, guys.
There he is, Eli Berkovits on the guest hotline powered by Gruber Law. One call. That's